Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Delta. This is a podcast about how blockchain and technology is changing our financial environment and discussing its impact on society. My name is Rustin Cavil. I'm the CEO and co founder of Coast. Joined with me today is my co founder, Dan Durning. We also have a special guest, Alexis Miller. She leads donor engagement and partnerships with Endaoment. Alexis, we are super excited to have you here today. Excited to get into what I perceive as a very unique conversation that I think more people should be aware of within the scope of finances in general. And maybe before we get into endowment and your work, I would love to hear a little bit more about you, how you got involved with endowment, maybe career progression, and digital assets as well.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. Thank you, Rustin and Dan. Um, as you said, I'm Alexis. I oversee donor engagement and partnerships at Endaoment. And how I kind of started out in my career is after college, I went to grad school. I have my master's in social work. And while in grad school, I realized I wanted to do more of the kind of macro nonprofit management aspect. And so I had interned at two nonprofits in the Philly area. And I was like, I'm going to give direct fundraising a try. And so I moved to Baltimore for a job. I did about 4 years in a direct fundraising role, soliciting annual donations from donors and, working with both next gen and kind of like older folks. And then I ended up working at my local community foundation in Baltimore, which is where I was living at the time, working with donor advised fund holders. And as the token young person on the team, I was kind of tasked with engaging the next generation of donors and family members. Most of the donors I worked with were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they were like, we want to get our kids involved in our donor advised fund and in our giving, and we want to get our grandkids involved, and we have no idea how to do it. And many of them didn't live in Baltimore and weren't necessarily connected to the local community anymore. And so I kind of went on this journey. Community foundations are amazing institutions, but they have been around for 50, 100 years. They're these older legacy institutions with little movement, little kind of creativity for thinking outside of the box. At least that was my experience. And so I went on this personal and professional mission where I was like, there has to be a donor advised fund out there that is more tech forward and isn't this like old bureaucratic institution and they're just doing things in a bit of a different way. And I found Endaoment. I knew nothing about crypto when I started at Endaoment over 2.5 years ago, and learned a lot in a short amount of time, and I'm still learning, and new things are popping up every day. And I think that is one of the really exciting things about being in both the crypto space, but also in the philanthropic space, and having that overlap of things evolving and changing every day in the crypto space or in the kind of fintech world, and then the kind of slow adoption, slower moving, hand holding aspect that oftentimes comes up in the philanthropic space.
I'm just curious, digging into, I guess, previous parts of your career, you've been in, or you mentioned that you have a master's in social work. Has that always kind of been an interest of yours? At what point did you decide that you wanted to take that path as a career?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think, as cliche as it is, I've always wanted to be in the kind of like helping profession. And
Sure.
so I have my undergrad degree is in developmental psychology, and I, um, through that program, had to do an internship at a school with kids, and it was amazing experience. And I realized what I did not want to do. I did not want to do direct social work, which is what I had always thought I wanted to do. I wanted to be a school social worker and work in schools and work with, teens and adolescents. And I quickly realized I do not want to do that. And so then I started learning more about the kind of macro type of social work, working with communities, working within institutions. And even though I feel like I am not a social worker in my like professional role, I feel like I use a lot of the skills and tools that I learned in school, working with people, relationship building, getting to know people, like meeting people where they are. I think I do a lot of that in my role at Endaoment and in previous roles, even though I'm not, working in a school, helping kids on a daily basis. I feel like I have this kind of like secondary impact of being able to help our donors fund nonprofits, like institutions that are helping kids and arts and culture and the environment and you name it.
I love that. I totally relate to sort of your progression from going from social work in grad school. I studied public policy in grad school,
Nice.
also very much focused on like helping. And I think what's really cool is like being able to work in tech as a social scientist or someone who has familiarity with social work or just how institutions work together. I think tech companies really benefit from our experience and skill set and
For
backgrounds
sure.
where more technical folks may not see like how all the pieces can fit together. So super cool that that's been your journey so far in tech and
Yeah,
endowment
you
and so
too.
forth.
Also love that you weren't in digital assets prior to joining Endaoment. And we'll get to Endaoment and donor advised funds here in just a second. But I would just be curious what your experiences have been within the crypto space for the last 2.5 years, coming in this from a very different set of perspectives and seeing crypto kind of solving a very real problem in kind of this new manner or in an antiquated space. And so, yeah, maybe just anecdotally, what have your thoughts been about the crypto industry, working within the blockchain industry, and kind of the technology that you've encountered just in your role at Endowment for the last 2.5 years?
Yeah, also has been a journey to say the least. When I started 2.5 years ago, like NFTs were a big thing, like bigger than they are now. And collectively, our largest donor at Endaoment is the Art Blocks community. And so worked with a lot of NFT artists as donors. And I was like, well, I need to like brush up on this. I need to be able to communicate with donors about crypto. Like these people live and breathe this every day. I have no idea what's going on. And so I really tried to just educate myself. And there were so many like women in Web3 communities that I tried to be a part of. And I remember first starting out, I had my like blockchain 101 deep dive with my boss. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. And I think the really unique and nice thing about the kind of Web3 crypto space in general is like, it is what you make of it. And I feel like there's something for everybody. And so, um, I am not a technology person. My brain works in such a different way. And so like I was interested in learning about the actual technology and, Endowment, we're using smart contracts, we're using blockchain for everything. We'll get a little bit into that later on, but I was like I need to know this at a very base level to be able to understand what we do, but that was not necessarily my like passion. It was like the technology that this is built on top of and understanding all the intricacies. Um, but I did see the community building aspect of what was going on in the space. And that is kind of what drew me to it. And I wouldn't even say I'm like that involved now, but I think it's really what you make of it and it's really what you're looking to get out of it. And, you see people who were in the NFT space 2.5 years ago who are now onto different projects, and you see people just kind of keeping up with the times. And like I mentioned earlier, like things are evolving every single day. Like something's coming up, people are getting involved, people are working on a project, and I think that's really exciting. And there aren't many spaces that exist today where things move so quickly. Obviously, there are negatives that come with that as well, but I think just from kind of like a outsider's perspective, it's been really cool for the past 2.5 years just to see how things have evolved and shift. And I even see it at Endowment where we're making these shifts based on the market or based on what the newest asset is. Or like before, we never even thought about donating like meme coins to Endowment, and now it's like people are getting in touch with us. People who are building things on Solana and they want to be able to donate. So it's like it's evolved so much in the conversations we're having with donors and the activity that we're seeing.
Just from my personal experiences, I find that both the best and the worst thing about this
Yeah.
industry is that things are ever evolving, always changing. And so there's always something very interesting to see. There's always experiments that are being conducted, and that spurs innovation. On the flip side of that, especially while building a company, it is impossible
Yeah.
to
Keep
keep
up.
up with everything and try to understand the nuances behind some of these experiments too. And so
Sure.
I really appreciate that perspective that you came in from a very different path than most people do. I think a lot of people either fall in love with the technology or they get sucked in through the culture of NFTs. And you came in through the philanthropic and social aspect. That's just such a unique path that we don't see. And so thank you so much for sharing that and kind of highlighting that. Also, you mentioned something that there's something within the blockchain industry for everyone. And that is wholeheartedly true. If people are interested in tokenizing real world assets or figuring out how to conduct more efficient mortgage processes, there's places for you there.
Yeah.
If you're into the really hardcore, deep technology, cryptographic component, there's plenty there for you. If you're just into it for the financial markets, there's obviously plenty there for you. And then the art and culture component, that's what got me into it. And I just think that is still a very underdeveloped segment of this market.
For sure.
And so maybe moving forward just a little bit before we get into the specifics of endowment, maybe you can explain what a donor advised fund is for the audience and why they should care.
Yeah, so a donor advised fund, I like to think of, or DAF for short, I like to think of it as a charitable checking account that an individual can open up, they can put money into, and they can send money out of it, but all philanthropically, right? So someone contributes, at Endaoment, we take like any asset. We got our start in crypto. I'll share a little bit about that. But let's say you donate 1 Bitcoin into your donor advised fund. It's converted into cash, and then you can actually invest those assets, right? So let's say it's worth $65,000, give or take. That $65,000 is deposited into this fund, and then you can actually invest those assets and grow them tax free. And then when you're ready, we call them grants to nonprofits. And so a donor advised fund is really a way to kind of decouple the donation aspect and the giving out to a nonprofit aspect. And we see a lot of people, especially at the end of the year, scrambling where they're like, I had a, huge appreciated token, or like, my stock like mooned or whatever happened, and I need to get rid of this for tax purposes. I don't want to pay capital gains taxes on it, and people can benefit from getting a charitable deduction. And so we see people opening up donor advised funds throughout the year, but especially an influx at the end of the year, where you just park the assets and then you can take your time to decide what nonprofits you want to support, as opposed to scrambling on December 30th and being like, I have zero connection to any nonprofit and I don't know where to give this 50K, right? Or this 500K or this $5 million. Like, you don't want to be scrambling at the end of the year to support nonprofits that you have no connections to and you have no idea the work that they're doing. And so people will rely on a donor advised fund to donate in, get that immediate tax benefit. And then in January or February or in a year from now, you decide what nonprofits you want to support. And, our team at Endaoment and other donor advised fund providers have internal people or, philanthropic advisory partnerships where they can help you if you need help in identifying nonprofits. Let's say you like arts and culture and you live in DC and you have no idea where to start. There are resources and people who can help you. It's not a DIY like donating to a random nonprofit would be, where you have to do your own research. And so, DAFs are kind of this, I think of them as like a hidden gem almost, where a lot of people don't know about them, or oftentimes a financial advisor or a CPA might be recommending their client opens one. But what about everyone who doesn't have a financial advisor? Or what about people who are using platforms like, a Robinhood for investing and a TurboTax for tax planning? They would have no idea that this exists. There's 2 million DAFs in the US, and there's about $230 billion sitting in them. And that is crazy to me because, the everyday person isn't necessarily opening a DAF, and that's something that we're trying to change. But they're huge. I mean, they're huge giving vehicles, and they're still extremely underutilized in the general philanthropic space.
230 billion?
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Crazy.
And I think about it too, not just from, okay, I've got a chunk of assets that I need to put elsewhere to be able to get a tax deduction, but also for folks who may not have a moon bag and want to start contributing to charitable
Yeah.
locations. I feel like for a lot of people, they may not want to just donate $100 because to them, it doesn't feel like it makes a huge impact. And I think what's so special about DAFs is that even for those individuals, you can deposit that $100 and continue to watch it
Yeah.
grow. What if in the next couple of years it's 1,000? Does that feel much more meaningful to be able to give to a cause that you care about? And so I kind of see that on the flip side too. It's both great for folks who are doing very well in the markets, and it's also great for people who are wanting to get started and don't really know how to allocate it yet
Yeah.
and want to see more impact with the assets that they currently do have.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's like the aspect of being able to actually grow your funds as well. You think about it as, yeah, people who are doing well are opening up donor advised funds and maybe they get like a little bit of growth, but somebody could really park their assets and, 5x them depending on what the kind of investment strategy is. And, at Endaoment, we offer both traditional, like normal QQQ, SPY, normal things that anyone knows and recognizes. And we also have on-chain portfolios that people can invest in. So it's nice to be able to kind of mirror the risk on and risk off approach. So someone who is looking to really grow their charitable impact, they're able to do so in a way, but they're not necessarily going to like lose all of the money that they just donated into their fund by being able to kind of set an allocation that's a comfortable risk appetite for the donor.
Super interesting. Maybe this is a good segue into what Endaoment is and how it operates. I think it's fascinating that until this year, this DAF really came onto our radar once we started talking to your team. And I think more people would benefit from access to it. So would love to just hear more about the Endaoment story and just how people can get involved.
Yeah. So, Endaoment, like I said, got its start in the crypto space, and it was started by our CEO and president, Robbie Heeger, kind of conceptualized in 2019 and formalized in 2020. And, you know, Endaoment is really his origin story. He talks about the fact that he was patient zero. And so he really built Endaoment for himself and then realized, oh, there's a ton of other people that could benefit from this. So it really got its start where Robbie had a donor advised fund at a local community foundation in the Bay Area. And every year he would give RSUs into his DAF. He used to work at Apple. And he left his job and got involved in the crypto space. And at the end of the year, went to his donor advised fund provider and said, can you accept, Ethereum or whatever it was can I donate this into my donor advised fund? And, of course, they looked at him like he was crazy and they're like, we don't do that. And so he started building Endaoment really out of this need where there are people with appreciated crypto assets who are charitably inclined or who would like to be charitably inclined now because they had a huge windfall and they feel so grateful and they want to be able to give back. And there wasn't a pathway for them to be able to get that crypto into the hands of a nonprofit because most nonprofits are not accepting crypto directly. They want to do nothing with crypto. And so enter Endaoment really as the place where somebody who has appreciated crypto can give into this donor advised fund. We convert it into cash and we send it directly to the nonprofits. And so it's kind of a win-win because we're able to give a tax receipt to the donor. They can donate the asset in its native form, which is a tax benefit as opposed to selling the asset and then donating it. I always have my many disclaimers of like, I don't provide financial advice. I'm not a CPA, et cetera, et cetera. But if you donate stock as stock or crypto as crypto, you're receiving a tax benefit for doing so. And then on the nonprofit side, right? Nonprofits are inherently, I mentioned earlier, this kind of like slow moving vehicle, slow to adopt technology. They don't have the resources or the capacity or the time, and nor should they. Like, it should not be a race against the clock for which nonprofit can hire engineers and start building technology to best meet their needs. Like, they should be focusing on the work that they're doing and finding partners and third-party platforms where they can use their technology stack. And so for us, it's been a game changer with our relationships with nonprofits, because sometimes they have a donor come to them like, hey, I have crypto, do you accept it? And instead of turning them down, they say, no, make a donation on Endaoment, and they'll pass the assets through to us. And so we've expanded beyond just the crypto space, although crypto still is our bread and butter and it's what people think of when they think of Endaoment. But we take in any asset and it's the same kind of flow of funds. So whether that's, stock, RSUs, private equity, had someone inquire today about donating baseball cards. Like, we will take any asset that there is a market for, or oftentimes even an illiquid market for the time being. And so really, like, we don't feel like donors should be prohibited in giving what they want to give, right? And same with nonprofits. Like, nonprofits should be able to receive any asset that a donor wants to give, and they shouldn't have to turn away gifts. And we've been finding and having conversations either with traditional DAF providers or with nonprofits, there have been so many instances of them saying, I'm so sorry, we can't accept this, and moving on, and like denying a $500K donation or something that could be life-changing for the nonprofit because they just don't know how to accept the asset. And so we do all of that for them. That is really what we do in a nutshell. And people can also do one-off donations. Like, you don't have to open up a donor advised fund in order to give on Endaoment. If you have, one ETH that you're just looking to donate to, United Way or Save the Children or something, you can just donate the 1 ETH. We convert it to cash. We send it directly to Save the Children. So super, super easy for anybody that is wanting to donate, especially at the end of the year, given that it's giving season and tax season, and lots of people are knocking on our door to give charitably at the end of the year, every year. So,
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible founder story and just reason for building. I think it reminds me a lot of Coast as well, where it's like it's
yeah,
born from personal pain points that we ourselves encountered.
sure.
And I just think that's such a cool way of building companies, like find a problem, solve it, and then find others to help
Yeah,
solve that problem for as well. And then, two, I also really like how dynamic Endaoment is with different types of assets. Coast, we obviously encounter this as well, but like, how do I
yeah,
get all my assets into one place? And I think that's such a cool part of crypto and Web3 is that the rules no longer kind of matter. Like, we can make new rules or new ways
yeah,
of navigating these donations or even just interacting with assets. And I think that's just so exciting and really cool that y'all are already thinking about baseball cards and other assets that probably are overlooked all the time or have never been considered in that application. So really
yeah.
just awesome stuff and some way everyone can get involved with.
Even like
Sure.
the fine art industry,
Oh,
isn't it
yeah,
like a $15 trillion industry or something like that? Just a huge amount of wealth accumulated and sitting, and having avenues of being able to liquidate and then be able to share those proceeds is massive.
yeah,
I also think that it's underlooked just how complex some of these things are, especially if you're wanting to give to multiple different foundations or charities or causes. That's a lot of administrative
hmm,
burden for both the individual as well as for the accepting organization. And so Endaoment streamlining that where I can just contribute to it and then with a couple of clicks of a button be able to allocate that and you guys handle the administrative component and the
exactly.
tax component is just massive. Um, and I'm of the opinion that when people are in a position where they are able to give, you should. We talk a lot about financial planning and setting up long-term goals. I believe that charitable giving should be part of that equation to be able to pass on to people who need it or to
Yeah,
causes that we believe in. And I think it's really easy to get in this mindset, especially within crypto, of oh, I need to hold on to this asset. What if it 100x's from here
yeah,
or whatever the case may be? And it's like, well, that might be the case, but we also have to pass on some of the things that we are given and the opportunities that we've had to people and causes that we also believe in.
yeah,
And what better way to do that than through Endaoment, where you can still see it 100x and then be able to donate a bigger bag to those causes.
yeah.
So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because it is true. I mean, sometimes we hear people say, like, yeah, I want to be able to donate, 100,000 or 500,000 or $5 million or whatever it is. And it's like, that's amazing and like good for you. And at the same time, you can still give back while you're trying to continue building wealth and accumulating more money. And it's like, we can do like time-based liquidations. We can do like, you can donate monthly to us, right? Like you can donate $1,000 into your DAF on a monthly cadence, and then you still have exposure in the market and you're still doing good and giving back. And there's so many unique ways to do it. And I mean, one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to have those types of conversations and be like, okay, kind of problem solve, like, okay, you're looking to do this thing. How can we best support you? And how can we think out of the box about how we might be able to do that? So I think it's super important. And something else that you said, Rustin, is like, this should be part of everybody's financial planning. And I was actually on a podcast yesterday and I was talking about like, if you're donating into your 401k monthly and you're donating into your investments monthly and you're saving monthly and you're doing this, it's like charitable giving should just be added there. It should not be like an afterthought of, okay, it's December 30th. I'm talking to my CPA and I'm scrambling, right? It's like people should be proactive about how much they want to give. And it's a great way also to involve family members or siblings and to be able to give back with your family. I know, when I was working in the community foundation world, there was a family that I was working with and they gave their kids, a certain pot of money, right? Like, okay, the kids get $50,000 and they get to decide where they want the money to go. And these kids were like, you know, 15 and 18 years old. And it was so cool to see, like, they would do their own research of like what nonprofits they wanted to support in the Baltimore area and what their interests are. And it's such a great conversation starter for parents to have with kids as well, or to do it with your spouse or do it with a brother or sister. It makes like giving fun and collaborative. And that's really what it should be. Like, giving should not be a burden to people. And as someone who worked in the direct fundraising space, like when I would call donors to make their annual gift, it was like painful because they're like, oh, Alexis is calling again for my annual support. Like, it was like a burden for them to give. And it should not be like that. It should be enjoyable and fun, and you should feel good doing it. It should not be this, oh, so and so is calling me for my annual gift, like, let me not answer the phone. Like, that is horrible. And we don't want anybody to feel that way. And so I think DAFs are a great opportunity where you can also, if there's been so many like natural disasters and hurricanes, and like we've been seeing an uptick in grant making because our donors have money sitting in their donor advised fund and they're like, I really want to help what's going on. I'm going to make $1,000 grant or a $5,000 grant. And it's so easy because the money's already there. You've gotten your tax receipt. And when somebody's calling you for support, or when there's a moment in time that needs your support, you're able to just give super quickly to them.
Yeah, I love that. And we're seeing more and more of those cases. And I think something that is overlooked in just giving in general is that it feels good.
Yeah.
People inherently know this. Whenever you help someone, it does feel good. But it seems like as society has progressed, we've become more and more isolated
Yeah.
from each other. And giving is a good way of being able to get closer to the community, get closer to humans, of the things that really bring us together and unite us as people. Like natural disasters are a really great example of that. Like, what better and more tragic way of being able to bring a community together than a common goal or a common struggle? And so I think it's really important, just as people, to not allow ourselves to become isolated, and giving is a good way to be able to get closer to humanity from that perspective. Also think that it's kind of something changes whenever you start giving to a cause, because if anyone listening to this podcast, if you're anything like me, I've invested in things in the past that I didn't fully understand. I had maybe a base level understanding of what this protocol does or what this company does that I'm buying an equity into. And then it's like suddenly once you own that asset, you start paying closer
Mm-hmm.
attention to what's happening and you want to know more, because you're like, well, I now have skin in this game.
Yeah.
I need to really understand what it is that I'm actually holding and whether it was a good investment in the first place. I think that giving is the same way.
So true.
Certain causes that I've donated to in the past, it's like now that I've donated, it's like, okay, let me dig into this a little bit more. What kind of impact are they making? Where is this capital going? And I want to hear stories and see the ways that it's positively impacting people. And suddenly that gets you closer to that cause as well. And so you mentioned on the nonprofit side, this is essentially a mechanism for them to be able to get exposure to donations, regardless of the asset, without them having to build the rails themselves.
Exactly.
And I think that's extremely special because it opens up opportunities for those nonprofits to be able to get closer to their donors through those charitable donations. And so, yeah, not really a question there, but more just my own experiences in charitable giving and investing and kind of that psychological component of what makes giving special.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it is so true. It is not just heartwarming, but you feel more invested and you're doing this kind of like deeper investigation, for lack of a better word, because you feel like you have this connection, you supported this organization, and you want to learn more and you want to get more involved. And that's just kind of the natural organic flow. And like I love the comparison to like the stock market or like buying a token, and like becoming more involved in like the community or seeing what's going on and keeping tabs on not just your money, but the kind of uh like deeper connection to what it is that you are investing in.
I think it also just to add on to that, it exposes problems that you don't know exist. It's like for the people who are working in nonprofits, they deal with those pain points and those problems
Yeah.
on a daily basis. They're having conversations with people in their communities who are struggling with whatever that nonprofit is dedicated to, contributing effort to. And so I think once you've been exposed to some of those problems that you may not feel as a donor, but that your community feels,
Yeah.
I think that it just kind of changes the way that you think about the people who are working in those organizations and the people in the community who are struggling in different ways.
Sure.
I just think it's really important. Kind of going, this is a hard segue here, but um, obviously, endowments allows people to be able to donate digital assets like cryptocurrencies, NFTs. Can you maybe speak to some of the technology behind the scenes, like the smart contracts and the deeper blockchain components versus just, hey, we have wallets set up that you can send these assets to?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, my disclaimer of like I am not an engineer. I have not built any of the
High
technology at
level.
Endaoment, but
Yeah.
to me when I first learned about Endaoment, it was kind of getting my feet wet. The ability for us to use smart contracts as essentially like escrow accounts, right? Where we are having somebody donate in, that transaction lives on chain, whether you're donating cash, whether you're donating stock, or whether you're donating crypto. And so there's this on chain component where I can see everyone's assigned a wallet, essentially, whether you give from your own wallet or we're spinning up a wallet address for you, which someone who's signing in with an email would have no idea. And like, that's how we want it. It's like little baby steps into kind of
Love that.
Web3. So, you're seeing a transaction of this wallet address contributed this amount on this day. And then there's also, obviously that is kind of like the donation smart contract architecture. And then there's the grant mechanism, right? Where we are actually flowing funds out of endowment smart contract to a nonprofit. And that nonprofit's EIN number is in the smart contract. So you can see that, $500 is going to Save the Children. I keep using them as an example because they're a great organization. And so I can see that $500 is flowing from the endowment smart contract into Save the Children's bank account, essentially. Obviously, that kind of like bank transfer is not happening on chain. But if we're paying out an organization to a wallet, let's say, that aspect is also on chain. And then you can also see all of the portfolio activities on chain. So like we mentioned, you can invest your idle capital. And so all of those transactions, whether you're buying QQQ or SPY or selling something off, there's also that on-chain component. And so I just think the added layer of transparency that it shows is something that is obviously important to the crypto community, but is also important just to donors in general. I think that nonprofits, this is a generalization, but like a lot of nonprofits are really opaque, and maybe they deliver an annual report that talks about how they use the donated funds, or maybe they're sending some donors like an individualized impact report for if you're donating large amounts of money, but there's no real proof of the flow of funds. There's no real proof that this much was donated to you and this is how much you gave out to either other nonprofits if they're kind of an intermediary like us. And so I think just our ability to use smart contracts and to have this on-chain component is just adding that layer of transparency. Now, I wish that like anyone could read it, right? I think that's a barrier now that we've expanded too, is like somebody who's donating stock and knows nothing about crypto, like they don't care that there's an on-chain component. They have no idea what the blockchain is. They have no idea how to like go to Etherscan and look at our smart contracts. And so to me, that's a little bit of a barrier where it's like we are totally gravitating toward the ethos and values of the crypto community. And I think the everyday consumer cares about those things as well, but they're not going to necessarily know how to read, blockchain data. And so I would love for there to be some type of like, education or something where we can really bring everybody into the mold. But I think just us like spinning up wallets and doing kind of like on-chain things behind the scenes is really cool. And it's the same thing for nonprofits, where it's like we've had some nonprofits who have gotten onboarded with Endaoment with a wire payout, and then they're like, no, actually we want to learn more about what's going on in the crypto space. And maybe they have a team member who is curious and they're doing research, and they're like, actually we want to get set up with a wallet, right? Like we want you to pay us out in USDC. That is not the norm. It does not happen that often. I can think of like a handful of opportunities that have come up like that. But when that does happen, that's a really cool feeling where it's like, wow, this person is kind of like really diving in. And there are some nonprofits we work with, even if they're getting paid out with cash, they have members on their team who are involved in the crypto space and who, I know like Twitter X spaces are like still a thing, but especially like a year, 2 years ago when they were like super, super hot, like there would be people from nonprofits in Twitter spaces trying to connect with crypto donors. And I just think that that is super cool and unique to this space where there are nonprofit folks who are like, wow, I'm interested in the technology. I'm interested in connecting with donors and learning more about what's going on. And so I'm going to like dive in deep and just kind of like go start hanging out where folks are hanging out. So that's a little bit more just about like our architecture and how we're built, and just the kind of added layer of transparency that we're trying to give, not just donors and people using Endaoment, but like just the broader community. We had a partnership with CoinTracker last year as a small example, where people who are using CoinTracker can actually see Endaoment smart contracts tagged as donations, right? So somebody who's using CoinTracker, for their taxes, tax deadline, whatever, they're actually able to see, oh, these 5 transactions were donations. Therefore, I'm receiving a tax benefit. And so we would love to do more in that space as well. I think there's a lot that we can do given the fact that we are using smart contracts and our smart contracts are tagged, and we have certain capabilities that we can partner and work with other platforms, other companies. I know we've had a lot of conversations about COAS and Endaoment, and there's just so many natural fits with different protocols and different companies that are popping up in the crypto space because we have this added layer of transparency and because we're using smart contracts for our donations and our grant making mechanisms.
Yeah, super interesting. I love the breakdown that you provided there of like someone can come from like Web 2 and join Endaoment and know nothing about blockchain or crypto, and then by the end of it be an active participant in the blockchain. And I think that's just a really cool thing. I like, we're very bullish on the idea that like the future of Web 3 apps feel like Web 2, but the underlying infrastructure uses blockchain, and that user experience like really optimizing for what people are already familiar with. And I think just to go back a little bit, you mentioned families being able to give together and being able to contribute over time. And pool donations in ways like that, I really think there's a cool intergenerational opportunity there where perhaps older generations who maybe don't know the first thing about crypto or have only heard of it in very obscure ways can connect with younger generations who can then help bring them into the fold. And then just zooming out a little bit further, like the great wealth transfer that has been talked about, where it's like $90 trillion is going to be transferred in 20 years. That like this is really a cool opportunity to start now building a legacy and a opportunity for a whole family across generations to all get together and use really cool tech at the same time. So yeah, just super cool how y'all have thought about this and structured it. I really think it's a great opportunity for everyone to consider.
We're big fans of Endaoment, in case the audience can't tell. We are super bullish on companies, organizations that are really trying to bridge that gap between traditional finance and DeFi. And Endaoment is just such a great example of that, using blockchain technology while a end user or a nonprofit doesn't even know that they're interacting with the blockchain. I recognize that we are coming up on time a bit. Do you have any final thoughts or topics that you would like to dig into? And if not, where can people find you?
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been a great conversation, and we're also huge fans of what you're doing at Coast. I think there's so much that needs to happen also in the space between traditional and digital assets, and you all are leading the way. And we're trying to, do the same with kind of merging crypto donations and normal donations and bringing people along for the journey. So just appreciate you having me on for the conversation. People can find me and Endaoment. Our website is endaoment.org. Endaoment is Endaoment. I always try to share that with folks because it's confusing. And that is our website. We're also on X and LinkedIn and Discord. All of that information is on our website as well. Happy to connect with anybody listening who is interested in donating, or if you're a nonprofit, or if you're a financial advisor or a CPA and you have clients who are interested in charitable giving. I'm Alexis Miller. Obviously, my name is on this screen, and my email is alexis@endaoment.org. And anyone, feel free to connect on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on any place that you all are. We are too, and so would love to have any further conversations with anyone interested in charitable giving at any time, but especially before December 31st, as we are in imminent giving season. So thank you again. For having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining on this episode. I think that we'll call that a wrap here. And yeah, just for the audience, if you are interested in what they are doing and want to give prior to the end of the year, go check out the website. It's really, really cool. Dan and I set a endowment up for Coast just to understand better the user experience, and it's really slick. And so I would just highly encourage anyone to, even if it's just a very small sum of money, to go check it out, get closer to your community, use blockchain in a new way that you may not have used it before. Definitely want to support their efforts in doing that. So yeah, once again, thank you all for being here, for listening in on this episode of The Delta, and we'll see you all next time.